Hello everyone. You should have already watched the Word Their Way video example 2.2 on page 31 through the Word Their Way enhanced e-text. In that video, you learned about the differences in the primary spelling inventory, PSI, the elementary spelling inventory, ESI, and the upper level spelling inventory, USI. How to select inventories appropriate for your students, and how to analyze or score each inventory using the feature guide. In this PSI practice video, you will be talked through and shown how to analyze the spelling development of two specific first graders, LaShawn and Tony, using the Read 5316 assessment tools from Word Their Way. First, you will need to have some materials ready before watching the full video. Have your copy of Word Their Way ready to access and bookmark several pages for later reference. Then print out the following documents included with this activity. Number 1, the PSI blank feature guide, which is this one I'm showing you on the screen. Print 2 copies, one for each student. Number 2, the PSI spellings for LaShawn and Tony, which is this one. And number 3, the PSI directions, this one. You need to read the direction before watching the video. If you have not read the direction yet, pause the video now and read. If you have all the materials ready and have studied the PSI direction carefully, you can continue watching this video. So first, let's talk about the purpose of this spelling inventory assessment and what we hope to learn from it. Through studying and analyzing these two students' spelling, we hope to identify the following about their orthographic knowledge. We want to know what they already know, what they already understand, what specific spelling patterns they are using but confusing, and what they need to learn next. The key is to identify what students are ready to learn next, and then plan for instruction to begin with word study activities that are appropriate for their stage of spelling development. By doing this, you will be setting up your students to succeed as word learners, readers, spellers, and writers. So let's look at spelling assessment for the two specific students. Let's look at this one. The two students featured in this assessment are LaShawn and Tony. Both are first graders in the same class. And this primary spelling inventory was administered in September at the beginning of the school year. Take a brief look at the spelling for both these students. LaShawn has attempted 8 words, and Tony, let's move to Tony, has attempted 15. Both the student did not finish all the word in the inventory. This is something you will need to pay attention to as you administer and score any spelling inventory. For the PSI, you want to call out enough words so you have at least 5 or 6 misspelled words to analyze. This number is important to remember so you know when to stop so that students do not get frustrated. Bookmark the heading Know When to Stop in Word Their Way on page 31 so you can find this information when you begin administering spelling inventories to your own students. Now, let's analyze LaShawn's PSI spellings with the PSI feature guide. Pause this video now and independently complete LaShawn's feature guide. using this feature guide. As you can see, after Lachon finished spelling this PSI word, the correct spellings for each word that Lachon misspelled were written by the teacher next to each word in red. By doing this, it's easy for the teacher to get a quick count of how many words he spelled correctly, which will equate to Lachon's power score. Lachon spelled 0 words correctly, so his power score is 0. Now look at this. In comparing this power score to table 2.2, power scores and estimated stages table, on page 32 of Word Their Way, Lachon's spelling stage is estimated to be emergent stage. Note, this is only an estimated stage. A complete feature guide will identify a student's exact spelling stage. So now let's talk through how to complete Lachon's feature guide. The use of PSI feature guide allows a teacher to know exactly which spelling features Lachon knows and understands and which he is using but confusing. By looking at the features assessed across the top of the column on the feature guide, it can be determined if Lachon has represented them correctly or not within the words on the inventory. Correctly represented feature spellings can be recorded on a feature guide with highlighting or check marks. As you can see, this teacher used check marks. The first word spelled is fan, F-A-N. And Lachon wrote F-S. This one. F-S. As his spellings are recorded on the PSI feature guide, we see that Lachon correctly represented the initial consonant F. He did not write the final consonant N, and he did not include the short vowel A. So the teacher recorded a check mark on the feature guide besides F, but not by N or A. The second word is pat. Lachon wrote B-T. We see that he did not correctly represent the initial consonant B. He did write the correct final consonant T, and he did not include the short vowel E. So the teacher recorded a check mark on the feature guide besides T, but not by P or E. The third word spelled is dig. And Lachon wrote TG. We see that he did not correctly represent he did not correctly represent the initial consonant D. He did write the correct final consonant G, and he did not include the short vowel I. So the teacher recorded a check mark on the feature guide besides G, but not by the D or I. So now it's your turn to score for the remaining words that Lachon spelled. Pause the video and record his spellings on the feature guide. After you're finished, restart the video to see how the teacher recorded. Now, let's look at the teacher's completed feature guide. for LeShang and compare it to yours. Scoring the word rob, hope, wait, and gum likely makes sense to you. You put a check mark beside every spelling feature he represented correctly. You may have been surprised that LeShang knew the initial consonant blend SL right here, given that he is still using and confusing some initial and final consonants and is not including any short vowels in his words. The spelling features on the feature guide do reflect a typical developmental sequence from left to right across the top, meaning that initial consonants are typically understood first, then final consonant, then short vowels, and so on. So why might the SL blend be so familiar to LeShang that he spelled the blend correctly? Can you make a guess? Perhaps the SL blend was featured in a whole class reading of a picture book and was followed by a class word lesson on words beginning with this blend, right? So while the left to right developmental sequence on spelling inventory feature guides represents typical spelling development, students sometimes differ in what they understand first. Now that all words spelled by LeShang have been scored on the feature guide, let's draw some overall conclusions about what he knows and understands, so we can determine where to begin instruction. LeShang had the opportunity on the PSI assessment to correctly represent seven initial consonant spellings, and he only spelled 3 out of 7 correctly. So because he missed 2 or more in the initial consonant column, we would say that he's using but confusing initial consonants. If we look at the final consonants, he correctly represented 4 of 7. So again, he's using but confusing final consonants. He did not demonstrate any control of short vowels. So should LeShang's word study instruction begin with short vowels? The answer is no. Why? Look back on page 34 in Word Their Way, about midway down in italics. Instruction should begin at the point where a student first makes 2 or more arrows on a feature. So after we have totaled all of LeShang's scores across and down for the word he spelled, we know that instruction should begin where he is using but confusing, which would mean to begin with initial consonant instruction. So the earlier estimate of LeShang as an emergent speller based on his power score of 0 is confirmed by completion of the feature guide. Initial consonant understandings fall under the emergent spelling stage. So now let's look at Tony. Let's move on to look at Tony's spelling and score them on a PSI feature guide. Pause this video now and independently complete Tony's feature guide first. Then you can resume this video when you're ready to compare your scores with that of the teachers. This is Tony. And now let's look at Tony's. Now let's look at the teacher's score in the initial consonant column and compare it with yours. Tony correctly represented all scored initial consonant spellings correctly, except for his spelling of the sixth word, wait. He had the opportunity to represent 7 final consonant spellings, and he spelled all of them correctly, 7 out of 7. In the short vowel column, Tony spelled 5 of 7 short vowels correctly. He had 2 arrows in the short vowel column. So this is where he is using but confusing, and this is where his word study instruction should begin. Tony kept spelling words until the teacher stopped at word 15. Note, there's a line here. Teachers often draw a line beneath the final words that student attempted to help them remember how many total words were spelled for an assessment. As we look at all other columns, Tony did not spell any digraph correctly, spelled 3 blanks correctly, and because he only attempted 15 words, he attempted the OE and the AI common long vowel spellings, but did not spell them correctly. Last, he did not spell any other vowels, diphthongs, arc influenced, and ambiguous vowels, or inflected endings correctly, for scores of 0 in these last 3 columns. Thus, the totals at the bottom of any feature column will need to be compared to how many words the student attempted. In Tony's case, only 15 words rather than 26 words on the entire PSI. With this in mind, Tony's power score is 4. The number of words he spelled correctly is the power score. And his total number of feature points would be 21 of 36 here. Because he only attempted 15 words. And thus, the total points would be 25, which is 21 feature points at the 4 word spelled correctly, the power score. Now that Tony's spellings have been analyzed using the PSI feature guide, let's determine his spelling stage. Just by looking at Tony's power score of 4 and estimating his level with the table, the table 2.2 on page 32 in Word Their Way, his spelling stage would seems to be at the late letter name alphabetic stage. However, according to his feature guide column scores, Tony's is a middle letter name alphabetic speller because the first feature column where he had 2 or more arrows was short vowels. You likely also noticed that Tony demonstrated some understanding of blends. So when you plan word sorts with a primary focus on short vowels, you may want to include some short vowels word containing blends. Okay? When differences between power score level estimate and feature guide levels are evident, always defer to what the feature guide indicates. In Tony's case, our conclusion should be that he is a middle letter name alphabetic speller. Also, when such differences appear, teachers often examine students' writing examples to provide them with additional insights about what students understand and apply as spellers and writers, and may adjust the starting point for instruction accordingly. As you consider students for your upcoming case study assignments, a writing example will be supplied in addition to spelling from an administered primary spelling inventory or elementary spelling inventory. On a final note for Later, scoring of feature guide, although neither Tony or LaShaw's spelling included any obvious letter confusions, these confusions are not unusual in young spellers. As an example of letter reversal confusion, a student might begin the spelling of a word, dig, with the lowercase b. Make a note in your Word That Way text at the bottom of page 32 or onto page 34 about how to score common spelling confusions. In general, letter reversals are not counted as errors, but these are typically evident in lowercase letters. In LaShaw's case, because he spelled dig as BT, a teacher, let's take a look at as BT. A teacher might point to the B in his BT spelling and ask LaShawn, "You wrote dig here, so tell me what letter you wrote at the beginning." If indeed LaShawn replies D, his teacher would not count this as an error. Asking confirming questions, if time allows, helps determine if the letter written was simply a confusion about how to write a letter rather than representing the initial sound incorrectly. So after watching this PSI practice video, you should have much greater confidence about how to analyze and record the results of a developmental spelling assessment, how to determine a student correct stage, and where to begin word study instruction. You will select one student out of 6 total cases provided to individually complete the case study part 1 assignment, which is due at the end of module 2. Later in the course, you will complete the case study part 2 assignment for the same students with a small group of your Read 5316 colleagues in module 4 when you plan word study instruction, and then in module 5 when you plan for vocabulary instruction. Another helpful video for a 5th grader student, see example case study Jake, is provided for you in module 2 under the submit link for your case study part 1 assignment. It includes a sample oral analysis video of the elementary spelling inventory in Word Their Way on page 33, completed for a student named Jake Fisher. Replay the Word Their Way video example 2.2. This PSI practice video and Jake's oral analysis video included in the sample case study, Jake, as many times as needed to help you with your case study part 1 assignment. If you have additional questions, consult with your peers or contact your instructor at any time.